Okay. So first of all, we have Alyse Sugahara, who's, very cool. One of the Black Lives Matter organizers, I think, here in Osaka, or does lots of events with that. And she's going to be talking about diversity in gaming. Okay. Thank you very much, Alyse. Let's go.
Oh, okay. Hello. Hi. Quick introduction because I didn't put an introduction on my slides. My name is Alyse. I've been in Japan for 10 years now. And I spent the first 2 years as an English teacher. And from then on, I started working in the gaming industry that exists in small amounts here in Osaka. I started as a game tester, eventually moved into translation. And I have worked at Nintendo for a bit. Oh, there's my cat. I told you he was gonna. Why are you here? What do you want? Say hello. Hi. now you have to say.
What's the cat's name?
This is Mr. Bingley.
That's such a good cat name.
He's such a gentleman. Okay, where was it? What was I saying? Yes, I worked at Nintendo for a bit. I've worked at Platinum Games for a little bit. And then I worked at Digital Hearts, which is a Japanese company, all doing game testing and translation. I don't have many game credits because they don't like crediting translators. But the one that I'm most proud of is probably working in the localization part of Ni no Kuni, the second one. And I will do this introduction one more time in Japanese. こんばんは。アリースと申します。よろしくお願いします。10年間ぐらい日本に住んでおりまして、最初は英語の先生やったんやけど、その後に7年間ぐらいゲームの業界で働きました。もともとゲームテスターで、その後翻訳者として会社勤めましたが、今は現在フリーランスで頑張ってます。ほとんどなんかトラブル業界の相談みたいななったん。急にそういう仕事入りましたんで、これからそれも頑張っていきたいと思います。よろしくお願いします。Okay, so now we're going to get into the presentation, which is about diversity in gaming, but specifically about the lack of diversity in Japanese games. Can you guys see it? We're good? Okay, thank you. All right, so first, before we even get started on that, there is something you have to understand about Japan. It's a very homogenous place. Maybe you already know that. As a result, I feel like it's a little bit difficult for people to consider diversity in the same way that we consider diversity. And as people coming from multicultural countries, when we think of diversity, we think of a range of skin tones, nationalities, or ethnicities. But in Japan, diversity could just, really just be a range of hair colors, maybe a few skin tones different, but they don't really consider ethnicity when it comes to diversity, right? As long as the color is a little bit different, it's a difference, so it counts, right? So we're going to just be exploring what is there, maybe what isn't there, what could be there in the future. It'll be a very casual talk. I'm not trying to hate on anybody's games. I still play games. I still play all the games, but I'm just, like to see a little bit, just a splash more color in there. So first, we're going to talk about diversity in games and why we need it. There has been some research. The research is still new about the effect that gaming, seeing yourself in games, seeing other races in games, and how that affects the way you treat these people in real life. There is an effect. And it's been recorded. The research that I have in my presentation today is actually from a more recent study from 2014. It was done in the US, so they used white gamers, and they had them play as a white avatar and a black avatar. And then they judged how they reacted to pictures of black and white people after playing the game for a period of time. And the study found that people that played, they had nonviolent and violent objectives to achieve in the game. And the study found that people that had violent objectives and they completed this violent objective with a black character tended to have more negative attitudes associated with black people after playing that game, where those attitudes were not present after playing as a white avatar. And of course, they don't know why this happens, but it's something that they've just noticed. And as a result, they think that, games just have to try to, it's probably a result of just people playing more often as heroes that are white. So we naturally assume white with goodness, where there aren't as many Black heroes, so the association is just not as strong as a result. I'll do that one more time in Japanese as best as I could, as best as I can. I keep forgetting I have to do it twice. Okay. 日本語モードに帰ります。まあ、ゲーミングではなんでこういうダイバーシティが必要っていうのか、まあ、日本ではそういう研究調査はもう起こってないんですけれども、海外ではアメリカでは白人のプレイヤーが、白人のゲームキャラとしてゲームをプレイして、そして黒人のキャラとしてゲームをプレイして、そしてその暴力的なオブジェクティブをやるとか、暴力じゃないの、オブジェクティブをやる。そういう調査をやってまして、で結果的には白人の人は黒人のキャラとして暴力的なオブジェクティブをやった方が、その後に黒人の写真とかを見たときにちょっとネガティブな印象が残ってしまってて、でそのネガティブ印象が白人の写真を見るときに全然なかったので、それなんでですかっていうのはちょっとまだその答えは出てないんですけど、そういうトレンドがはっきり見えましたので、これからそういう調査も続けるんじゃないかなと思いますけど、まあこっちのスライドに載ってるのグラフはその暴力的じゃないのオブジェクティブ、non-violent then the violent 暴力的なオブジェクティブ、まあ黒人のアバターがグレーの色になってる、白人のアバターがこの白い色になってます。で右側がそのネガティブ印象、黒人の人に対してネガティブな印象が残ってる。explicit to implicit, I don't know how to say it in Japanese. It's like explicit and implicit. むずい。これちょっとわかんないけど、ごめんね。また後で検索します。けど、まあ、そういうなんていう、how to say, 面でわかる、すぐわかるような印象と、ちょっとなんか隠れてるような感じの印象っていう感じですけど、バイレントの方では、暴力的の方では、黒人の悪い印象がかなり高くなっておりまして、で、その白人と比べたらね、結構差が出てますし、で、インプリシットの場合、ちょっと隠れてるの場合は、かなりの差がありますよね、暴力的のところでは。だからなんでこういう差が出てるのかを、これからの調査で探ることはすると思うんですけれども、はい。そういうことです。All right, I think I covered everything. Okay, thank you. Oh, Jesus. So, the next slide. About why we're continuing a little bit of this conversation of why it's important. And I found this really cool quote from a scholar. She works in diversity in tech and gaming. She's done quite a few presentations on this. And I read this quote because I think it points to why it's important that we have diversity, because I'll just read the quote. When the only option to experience the fantasy worlds of many games is through white characters, it internalizes in many gamers that those fantasy worlds weren't designed for them. Anything is possible in games, Gray told me in a reference to her passion for the industry, but anything is only possible for white characters. When they add black characters to a game, they root them only in their real world context. Why can't black characters ride dragons? And sadly, this is a very true thing that we see often in games. I mean, whenever I ask my friends, what's a game with a black main character that you've played? It's like Saints Row. I'm like, oh yeah, the game where you like rob and like, do all, which is fun. I love me some Grand Theft Auto. But I would also like them to be like, oh yeah, there was that one Witcher game that had like a black Witcher. Or there was like that one, Final Fantasy game that just had someone that was a little bit darker than usual. So we don't get that same bit like variety in fantasy games that we tend to see even in sports games. There's often black players that are on covers of FIFA or Madden games. You don't just see that in action or fantasy games. And even though it's a fantasy world, completely made up, not bound by the constrictions or the politics of our world, we're still kind of absent. And it's, zannen ne. So I now have to do it in Japanese. Sorry, guys. Oops, sorry. このコート全部、訳しないんですけれども、こういうダイバーシティに関するのリサーチャー、アメリカに活用してますの、研究者が なんでこういうファンタジーのゲームでは白人が何でもかんでもになることができるなのに、黒人のプレイヤーはだいたい今のこの世界、私たちに住んでるの現実とだいたい同じような、ステレオタイプがそのまま続くのかっていうのを質問を出しているので、まあ確かによう考えたらファンタジーの世界ではもう何でもできる。色も関係なく国っていうものも今の世界と全然違うやのに、黒人と、まあ、肌ちょっと黒いのキャラが同じようなヒーローとしてとか、そういう素敵なファンタスティックな表現としてあんまり現れないのかはなぜだろうっていうの質問なんですけれど、確かによう考えたら別にファンタジーの世界では何でもできるはずやのにねっていう話です。So now the next few slides, we're going to talk about the kind of diversity that's currently present in Japanese games. So here's my beautiful collection of faces from your typical Japanese games. I think these are games more or less from the last 10 or so years because there just aren't as many. I guess when I was trying to research this is the collection of RPG and action adventure games, but every time I would type in, like list of the most popular games of the year, for Japanese games, they tend to be older. They tend to be HD remakes. They don't tend to be a lot of new titles that are not previously connected to series. My English and my Japanese are going to go out the window today. But yeah. Anyway, so here we have a nice color bar. I've made the color bar out of the skin tones from the characters' pictures. It's a little difficult because, there's some crazy shadows. But these are basically all the skin tones that you see in the characters present on the screen, with the darkest being all the way on the right, the lightest being on the left. And you can just see how, as the further you get to the darker side, the characters tend to get more sparse. And I believe on that side, there are very few main characters or characters that you get to play as. The number just, drops. So now we're going to break this down by RPG and by action adventure game, because I feel like there's quite a difference in the way that characters are, especially skin tones are represented in those two genres. This is your typical, RPG layout. You get a band of characters. You usually play as one main character. Back in the day, that's how you play. Now you can kind of play as many characters, but these are the characters that you would usually see on the website. I've chosen to admit Japanese games. Yes, I forgot to mention this. Oh, I forgot to do it in Japanese. Oh, dang it. I'm so sorry. All right. Shall I go back and do it in Japanese?
I think you can understand that, like, that's the range of characters, no?
Right? まあ、briefly このグラフっていうか、このカラーバーは今の画面に映ってるのキャラのスキンね、肌の色を表してます。そしてこの結構白い色の方がキャラもぎゅうぎゅう集まってるので、どんどん、黒くなるとちょっとキャラもなんかよりリアルになるんですけど、少なくなるもんね、キャラ自体が。So in the next one we have RPG, JRPGs, Japanese role-playing games, which were super popular back in the day. I don't know about now so much, but I've chosen to omit games that are based on anime series just because anime series tend to start from manga, which tend to be very personal, like they're, closely based on, authors' lives and their environment, their culture. So I don't expect manga and anime from Japan to suddenly have a crazy diverse range of characters. That doesn't make sense. They're not thinking about worldwide sales when they start writing a manga. However, I believe when it comes to games that have to sell millions of copies, companies are obviously, they're focused on selling as much as they can. And if they're going to focus on selling as much as they can, they're going to try to market the game to as many people as they can. As such, they should, I think, strive to have a varied collection of colors of characters to choose from. On this slide, there are 73 characters, I believe. I don't remember the last time I counted, but the very last time I counted, maybe there were 73 characters on the slide. And I think there are about 5 characters that you could kind of consider as non-white. The Persona 5 characters are all technically Japanese, but when you look at them, they're not drawn like Japanese people, right? They're drawn in fantasy Japanese people, but they kind of look like white people. That's a style. That's what they want to do. That's fine. But why not also have Japanese people that are also dark, because they very much exist in Japan. And it's just something that I noticed. So yeah, if we include the Japanese characters who count as people of color, then there would be 8 characters that are POC. The rest of them tend to have, weird Pseudo-European English-y names. And as far as you can tell from just looking at them, they look like white people, which, sure, that's fine. The next slide is for anything that's not a JRPG. I tried to divide it like action adventure or survival horror, but there just weren't enough characters. I couldn't find enough. So here we have a collection. We have things from Nintendo. We have things from PlayStation. I don't know if anybody still plays Xbox, but in a similar exploration, we put all of the characters here. I think in action games, it's not as uncommon to have a brown character thrown in there as some kind of side character that talks occasionally. There are more women, I feel like, especially women that you can play as the main character. I feel like in these games, there's a bit more of that going on. But for the most part, all of the male characters, all of the lead characters, except for Yakuza, which is obviously a Japanese game, they are kind of like these rough-looking, middle-aged white men, which is a common player one choice for games. On this page, there are 52 characters, and I counted only about 4 that had any kind of real noticeable melanin. There's a black dude from Metal Gear Solid, Kevin. There's the 2 Splatoon kids that are brown enough to count. Actually, no, there's the girl from Resident Evil 5 who is South African, but she looks the same color as Chris, but they're not. But that's what happens when you put too many filters on your gaming covers. And then there's a small little black boy in the Wonderful 101. But everyone else, the Japanese, there are a lot of Japanese characters. I feel like there are way more Japanese characters. But there's also just not as many characters because action adventure games don't have the same kind of character roster that you would get from a JRPG where you just have tons of people everywhere, right? So, okay, in Japanese, I forgot. 今の2つのスライド、両方とも、結構ウェブサイト、ゲームのウェブサイトが、そのゲームを検索するときによく出てくるキャラなんですけれども、この100人の中ではかなりの白さがありますんで、日本人のキャラの場合でも、こっちの Persona 5のキャラは全員日本人だけど、こういう金髪な色とか、青色の目とか見たら、別に日本人ような感じで描いてないんですよね。でも、みんなも同じ、すごい白いなお肌で描いておりまして、で、なんでですかね。なんでそんなに白人が多いなのっていうのは質問だったんですけれどもね。さっきの RPG の場合は73人ぐらいの中ではね、4人しかその肌色、ちょっとだけの茶色とか、別に黒人として、私は別に黒人ですっていうの認識じゃないんですけど、肌がちょっと茶色なと思うキャラは4人ぐらいです。そしてアクションゲームの場合は、ちょっと茶色の肌、ちょっと黒人に近い感じじゃないかなみたいな。ケビンさんは確かにコンロもあるので、黒人ですねっていうの感じですけど、そして南アフリカの子はね、黒人ですけど、4人、52キャラ、多分54のキャラかもしれへんけど、4人ぐらいは、ちょっと白い肌色以外の人なんで、 かなり少ないな数字です。So, this is a little color trick. I went to art school. Full disclosure, I went to art school. That's probably why I'm so obsessed with like looking at colors. And I'm like, this is a color bar. And when we're drawing a picture, we often put a white, not filter, but a white layer on top of it to see how much range of values we have in the picture. Because usually the picture with more value range is more striking to look at. It's just easier to look at. So I've applied the same kind of thought process, but with this color bar, because when you look at the colors, you see many colors. So in your head, you're like, well, it's pretty diverse. There are lots of colors here. I don't see what we're complaining about. But when you put them in black and white, you can see that the shade doesn't really change. They're not getting that much darker. It's like a smidge darker. There's a lot of range in the saturation. Maybe people are more orange or more red or more pink or more gray. But in terms of darkness, they're not getting that dark. So at the very bottom, we have a value scale that you would use to see how dark something is getting. And the skin bar above, it stops at about a 6, with the lightest being a 9. So a little bit before the halfway mark, but it's not the most diverse range of colors. そうか、日本語。そう、そしてこれの肌色のカラーバーですね。私はアート学校行ってるの人なんで、すごい、その色はなんていう、色の考え方とかはすごい興味があるなんですけれども、まあ、絵を描くときはですね、その絵を描いてるのレイヤーの上に、ホワイト、白いのレイヤーを作って、そこでバリューチェックを行うんですよね。で、そのバリューチェックで、そのイメージがどんだけ印象的、インパクトがあるのかを確認することができるんですけれども、まあ、同じ考え方をこの肌色のカラーバーに使いましてで、どれだけの違いがあるかっていうのを確認ですね。だってその単純に色を見るときにいろんな色を使っているので結構ダイバースじゃないのっていうのは当然です。けどこのモノクロにしたらそこまでの違いは出ないんですよ。かなり真ん中ら辺で一緒になってて結構3つに分けてる感じですよね。そして一番下の value scale スケールですけど、その白から黒までのスケールで多分一番、黒い dark のグレーのトーンは多分6番に近いなんですけれども、まあスケールで言うとそこまでっていう感じですね。そしてこのカラーバーですねをメインキャラのみにしたら多分ギュッともっと狭くなる。多分その違いがもっと見にくくなると思います。So this is something I like makeup as well. So I just thought I'd throw this in because I thought it was interesting while I was looking for more ways to talk about color changes. I remembered that Fenty has 50 different shades that you can choose from, it was the most at the time that they released it. Because traditionally makeup brands just didn't cater to people that were that dark. They tended to stop at like the 20-25 range. So they basically expanded the color range by half. They doubled it. Whoops, sorry. And I wanted to see how far the darkest color on the color bar that I'd made, how far he got. He got about the tan range. He's something up. He's got like a golden hue to him. So he would look good in like a 330 Fenty shade. But when you consider all of the other skin tones that come after him, you realize how dark he really isn't and how many other colors there are left to explore. So for comparison's sake, I also made the foundations in black and white. So you could see that the foundations follow pretty closely the value scale that we use in art. They have the darkest shade, the 1. They also have pretty much the 9 of shade that's pretty close to white. And I feel like if makeup can do this, which is, I don't know. I can't compare how much money is made in makeup versus what is made in gaming. I don't know. But if makeup companies can do it, surely the designer can flick just flick their color, just slide it a little bit to the left and just give me a little bit more to work with. It would be appreciated. そうね。これはどう見てもコスメですね。なんでコスメを出してるというか、まあ まあちょっとその色はどれだけ黒くなっているというのをもうちょっと分かりやすくするためですね。このブランドは50種類のファンデーションを販売しておりまして、でこのキャラ、そのカラバーの時の一番、黒いのキャラなんですけど、まあ大体真ん中らへんぐらいまでいてるんですね。まあそこまで黒くないけど、結構いろんな肌色もまだまだ触ってないところもあるので、ぜひこれからのゲームメーカーさんもいろんな肌色を挑戦してみたいなと思ってて、こういうスタイルも出しました。Okay, next one. So now we're going to talk about some of the more cringy representations of POC that we've had in gaming. They do exist in Japanese games. They don't always exist in the best light. For men, they tend to look very muscular. They have lots of robot arms. I don't know what that's about. But they're always, kind of hyper masculine, right? And for the women, I don't know why, but they're always wearing bikini tops, or they always got their boobs out, and I mean, that's fine. The cosplayers make it look great. I love those cosplayers that do those costumes, but I don't have any of those body parts. So I just be like, I can't do none of that. No, but seriously, it would just be nice to see like variety in the representations of POCs that are shown in games, right? We've seen these for like the last 20 years. I think now it would be nice to just see characters that are like tiny pixie people that are also brown, or like dudes that are super skinny nerdy dudes that are also brown, right? POCs can inhabit many kinds of, I don't know, crazy stereotypes. They don't have to just be these two. Okay. So all the color stuff is done. That was all the fun bits. Now we're going to get serious. And we're going to talk about why the Japanese companies should care, because I know a lot of people will be like, well, these are Japanese games. They're made by Japanese companies. Oh, I forgot to do the Japanese again. I'll do it in a second. Yeah, these are Japanese games made by Japanese companies. Their market is Japan. So why should they care? They should care because their market isn't just Japan. Obviously, they're making money worldwide. And if they want to compete on a world stage, the world stage of gaming, I feel like Japanese companies should be held to the same standards that American companies or European companies are held to as well. And we often criticize those companies when they have problematic representations of POCs in games, or they just don't have any. We're very vocal about it when it comes to these companies. But for some reason, when it comes to Japanese companies, it's very easy for people to give them a pass and be like, well, they're Japanese, so they don't get it. They get it. They know. We should definitely start talking about it a little bit more. But before we go there, let me do a little quick Japanese translation of the previous one. こっちのスライドですね。ちょっと現在の日本のゲームの中に出てくるの、黒人っていうか、まあ肌がちょっと POC の言葉はまだ日本語であんまり存在しない感じなんですけど、まあとりあえず黒人として黒人使おうか。まあ大体の黒人の男性の場合はすごいムキムキでパワフルなキャラがほとんどですね。でまあみんながそれ見てこれ悪くないでしょっていうと思うけど、でまあ確かに悪くはないけど、歴史を振り返ってみるとね、歴史を考えると、こういうパワフルなイメージは黒人の男性にもうすごいなんてまあステレオタイプですね。そしてあまり良くないステレオタイプ。こういうステレオタイプがあるから警察からの攻撃を受けたりとかしてて、そういうものもあるから、こういう表現は別にたまにはいいけど、いろんな体型とか特徴とかを作ればよりいいんじゃないかなっても私も思ってるし、他の黒人のプレイヤーもそう思うし、まあ女性の場合はすごいセクシー、みんなすごいいいスタイルですよ。すごいいいスタイルですけど、やっぱり他のタイプも見たいなと思うですね。OK。そしてなんで日本の会社がこういうダイバーシティを考えたらいいの？なんでなんで考えなあかんのっていう話ね、これからします。
At least we're at 20 minutes now, so
Let's go.
and maybe just do like a summary of some of the stuff
Okay.
a little bit faster.
Let's see. なんでだろう? Well, I think the most important Japanese companies to know is that a lot of POCs play video games, maybe more than they think, more than I thought, actually, when I read this article. It's from 2015. It's Pew Research, and it's only for teens in the US, but it showed that more Hispanic and Black teens played video games than white teens, and that white teens viewed video games as more of a waste of time. So obviously this is still a small sample group, but I'm sure if we were to expand the number of people, maybe the trends would be very similar, and it would be worth considering that if the market that's most enthusiastic about games, that being Black and Hispanic kids, if they spend the most time with it, that maybe if we started tailoring more games to this group, they would also buy more. And I will talk about about purchasing things in a second. なんで日本の会社がこれを考えないといけないっていうか、この調査では2015年の調査で、10代の子を調査したところで、黒人とラテン系の場合は結構ゲームやってる子が多かったんで、そしてゲームは無駄な時間使いって思う子が白人の方が多かったです。だからこう見るとやっぱり黒人とラテン系の子がゲーム遊んでるので、そういうゲームもしゲームの中ではいろんな肌色のキャラを増やしたら、こういう子は絶対こういうゲームそのゲームを買うんじゃないかなと思ってて。And when it comes to sales, I would like to point out something that I thought was really interesting as to why Japan should care. In terms of ratings, Japanese games score very high. They often take up 5 places, most of the places in the top 10 games of the year. However, when it comes to sales, they don't fare as well. The games that tend to sell better are sports games or games with like lots of characters, Mortal Kombat. Also, Smash has a ton of character choices, right? And I think it's probably a pretty good marker that players prefer games where they have more choices of characters, dare I say, skin colors to choose from. Of course, I can't say this is gospel, but it's just something interesting to think about. So I'm going to skip to the end as to, what I guess the takeaway is, right? So here we have the highest scoring game of the year, which was Resident Evil 2. And then we have the highest selling game of the year, which was Call of Duty Modern Warfare. The biggest difference is there's women on both of them, which is good. That's very good. But the 3 characters that you can play as in Call of Duty are a white dude, black dude, and a Middle Eastern woman. While in Resident Evil, 2 ambiguously white characters. I'm going to look at my notes because I forgot what my point was. For consumers, yes. There isn't really much of a takeaway for this kind of presentation because we will play what we want to play. We will play the games that we enjoy. And in 2020, playing what you enjoy is important because the escapism is needed. But what I didn't get to show you was that emerging markets like in Africa and the Middle East or in Southeast Asia where internet speeds are getting better, people are gaming more. I think it will become more apparent that games that cater to more skin tones will continue to do better, where games that are pretty limited in their offering of just characters that look like the people that are playing the games, they just might not sell as well. And that might be a trend that we're starting to see. For Japanese developers, being game of the year is always very nice, but I assume that most companies want to make money. So if making money is the goal, maybe trying a little diversity might help them in that respect. I can't say that will definitely help them, but it's just a little bit of food for thought. In any case, it's definitely a good idea to keep guns on the cover. The games will surely sell well in that case. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyse. Thank you so much.
I always go way over. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. So now, thank you so much. It was super interesting. It's something that I think everyone needs to think about a little bit more. So we now have about 10 minutes for questions. So if anyone wants to clarify some things, or wants to know any more about the topic?
Yeah.
Time. So yeah, for Zoom, you can just unmute your microphone and go ahead, or anyone in the YouTube chat, just type your message in and we will find it there. And now we wait.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Will. Thanks for the presentation. That was very interesting. I'm actually half Japanese, half American. So I feel like I'm actually just as sensitive as you are when it comes to the personification of races in different video games. But I was curious what your thoughts were on like the plot line as well, and how that's relevant in light of the whole racial discussion we're having. Because I think even fantasy now, like even in fantasy, a lot of the fantasy games are based on like Nordic or any kind of like Indo-European, what do you call it? Like mystical, storylines and so on and so forth. And you can say the same thing about any like Asian game. There's a lot of like mysticism there, but when it comes to like Black culture, I guess, for example, I think like, out of necessity, if we're talking about things that are mystical, you would have to have at least somewhat of a understanding of that culture's mysticism and their way, view of the universe and so on. And obviously, if we don't have any Black creators, for example, we're not going to have that many games like that, right? So
yeah, that's a big problem in the industry. Yeah. I think you're equating fantasy, and you're saying that because it's based on reality, it has to follow, I guess, the rules of reality. But if the game is fantasy, even if it's based on European things, there's no reason for there to not be a variety of colors in it. Also, Black people have been in Europe for thousands of years. So they're very present in European work. So I don't see it as a thing where you have to use African spirituality in order to have fantasy games with people of color. Of course, when it comes to especially like Asian games that are like, oh, this is like, you can tell like it's based on Asian mythology, then yeah, it's going to be a little bit difficult to insert the diversity in there. But if the game is supposed to be fantasy, like for example, Zelda, it's a place that is not really, it has castles, so I guess that's European, but its mythology is not based on anything in our world. People could be blue, and I think everyone would still want to be Link, right?
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the type of fantasy you're really referring to, but it kind of just made me wonder because, like, if, the majority, like, if we're talking about something like Zelda, for example, we're talking about, like, elves and fairies, basically, and, taking place in somewhat of a mystical world, but it kind of made me wonder, well, what would a game where, like, Asians or, like, Europeans or whites were the minority? And it's like a predominantly like Black game, for example. It takes place in I don't even know where, like, sub-Saharan Africa or something, where the tigers, or I don't even know, like the lions have mutated or some shit like that.
Oh dear, we're getting into like stereotype territory.
No, totally. I know. That's what I'm saying though. It's basically the lack of these games gives it I feel like because of the frame of reference not being from the perspective of what we would consider people of color. Yeah, people of color. I feel like, because the creators are out of their own perception, they're not going to have that perspective. It makes it different, So I was just curious, like, what your thoughts on that were as well.
We definitely just have to make the industry more diverse, which is a conversation, we've been having for years. Because I think when you have more people, you just get more ideas. When you work with the same kind of people for like the last 20 years, things get recycled, things get reused. We've seen it before. Like whenever, I hate to say it, like when I see new games come out and I see the rugged middle-aged white man, I'm like, I've seen this game before. I've played it before. I'll play it if it's good.
Something I've played before,
But I think, when you don't have the people in the office to offer the ideas, no one's going to really think about it.
Yeah. And I mean, have you looked at, I mean, we were talking about mainly Japanese games, but I would imagine that, if it's like a US game, for example, like Japanese or Asians would be actually a minority with regards to, in relation to I don't know, like when you look at the racial diversity of the United States, it's, you got whites, and then I think it's I'm not sure what the
Latinos, it's Hispanic.
Is it Hispanic? Okay, yeah. But I
yeah,
mean, it kind of
they're more.
wonder,
There's more.
it can kind of made me wonder. Well, you know, it depends on the country it's made too, right? Because like I'm a minority here in Japan, so I wouldn't expect, you know, but like a lot of the characters you said look, they're very European, or you know, they have white traits, I guess. So,
they don't look like Japanese people necessarily, even though they're all Japanese games.
Exactly. So
I think it's just we have to start. Yeah.
I was gonna say, it just made me think, like, it just made me think, like, you know, obviously the color of the skin color and stuff of the characters matters, but I think just as equally the cultural background of those characters also matters, because you don't want that to be kind of like negated, you know. And you know what I mean? And I like there's certain games that I play that
this is Raymond. Please, we want to give enough time for everybody to
sorry, I
questions. Sorry, it's getting a little bit of discussion territory here.
Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
No, it's cool. Great question.
If you have any questions, you can also, I don't know if Alyse, you want to drop your email or Instagram or something like that.
You can hit me on Twitter. We can have a great Twitter thread about it.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? Maybe not.
I do have one. Can you hear me? Is that the thing? Yeah, cool. I was just wondering. So you mentioned there was a lot of black examples that were not ideal, for example. And yeah, I can definitely buy into that. It's the same thing with what you were saying with the middle-aged white guy being the standard guy. It's like, okay. And part of it, I guess, is communication. But the thing is, there's certain communication you want to build and some you don't. So as a developer myself, I'm kind of interested in what would you consider an ideal person of color character? So you've got a lot of what not to do. What would you see as the goal in a lot of the character creation or development sort of thing?
Honestly, you could take any main character from any popular game and make them brown. You'd be fine.
Do you think that would be because that wouldn't really represent the culture?
See, that's where people are getting caught up. They think they have to take the whole baggage of black culture into making the character black, right? Remember we talked about the quote at the beginning where she was like, this is the world of fantasy. White guys can be anything, completely detached from what white men are here in a way. But when it comes to black characters, they have to carry the baggage of being black in this world to being black in the fantasy world, where I don't think this is not necessary. Just have a character that's any color. They could be purple for all I care, you know? Like when I saw the Cyberpunk game, I was like, the future. We're in the future. There's robots. This dude's going to be like clear faced. Like he's going to be super robot. And then it was a white guy. And I was like, we're in the freaking future, dude. You could make this dude look like anything. He could be a robot that changes skin colors because it's part of his robot makeup. But they went for like the easy. And also, I don't know if you know, which game was it? Not Divinity 2. Some recent RPG. Is it
Baldur's Gate 3?
Yes, and the character creation system and the developers got mad that everyone kept making like a white dude. They're like, we have dragons. We have, you know, horns. You could make anything. But everyone wanted to make a cool middle-aged white dude. So I think there's a culture change that has to happen from us personally. It's not really about what the game is showing. It's about what we expect from the game. If we expect the character to be any color, it doesn't matter how, you know, black people are being treated. That's not going to be, it's not going to have any context in Devil May Cry where we're like slicing up demon people. It doesn't matter.
Right. Okay.
You know?
Cool. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're going to take a little break now.
Oh, wait, there's a comment on YouTube.
Yeah.
Can I just bring that out?
Go ahead.
So in regards to the entire topic, in fact, what you're talking about now, the issue has also recently been highlighted in The Sims 4, where players feel people of color skin tones haven't properly been represented. So if you can comment on that, that's fine. If not, like, is
it just not enough color variety in The Sims?
I'm not familiar with this. This is the first time I've heard.
The last Sims game I played was when it first went online. So we're talking like 98, 99. Sims is out of my territory, but I will say that even in games where there's character creation, the darker skin tones tend to not look as good. They just tend to be really desaturated, when they don't consider like the undertones that Black people have. Like some Black people are reddish or more goldish, and then the darker the skin tone it gets, it becomes more of a dark reddish, almost like a purple kind of undertone. And because developers probably don't have anyone on the team that has that skin tone and can guide people in the right direction, you often end up with really flat, kind of darker skin tones. Like I kind of go with the generic tan because I don't have choices. Like I would really like a soft, like under golden with a nice red hue sometimes, but you know, it's a little bit limited. And we just have to, I think the more we tell developers, because now we have a way to reach developers kind of directly, be nice, of course, don't yell at them, but we just have to be like, hey, we appreciate it, but maybe you could also do a little bit better, right? We just want everybody to do a little bit better.
Nice. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Alyse. That was super interesting.
Thank
All
you.
right, so let's take a 10-minute break, I think. If anyone wants to stay online and keep chatting, go ahead.
Yeah.
Then we will come back. Yeah, let's say come back at 7:05, and then we will have the next talk.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.